Hey guys, right now I'm gonna try to teach you how to do like kind of a basic animation using Krita. Krita is a free software developed by artists. It's a free Photoshop alternative. It's pretty helpful for what it is. I don't use it for drawing because I don't like how the brush stabilizers work, but I do use it for sketching out my animation roughs and stuff like that. If you haven't already downloaded it, you can do so by going to the Krita page and going to download. If you have a newer computer, you're gonna want to download the 64-bit. If you have a older computer, you're gonna want to download the 32-bit. Right now I have it set up as the default layout. You can change how you want your layout to look by going to this little square up in the upper right hand corner that has the like just a bunch of lines in it, and for me you have to right click it and then you can look through, turn it off, you can look through all the different stuff that it has to offer. What I'm gonna do is go over to Window on the top bar, and then go to Workspace, and it has a few like default layouts. I'm gonna go to Animation because that's what I'm gonna be using it for. This is just personal preference, but I'm gonna drag the advanced color selector over here if I can, yeah. So I'm gonna put some extra stuff in. I'm gonna get my brush presets, and I'm gonna get my, okay, so since we're doing animation, one thing that you definitely want out is your onion skins box, and this brings up this little box that has like a bunch of lines and a slider bar and then two different colors at the bottom. These are gonna tell you what your frames are before what you're drawing currently and after what you're drawing currently. I'll explain kind of how that works later. So what you're gonna do is make a new file. You're gonna make it, it depends on what resolution you want, but I'm gonna do 1920 by 1080 because that's the default. Not default, but it's the HD YouTube quality. You can name it if you want. Right now I'm not gonna name it. So you create, and then you have this huge canvas, and you can zoom out using scroll wheel or whatever. So you have two layers over here. Don't draw on layer 1 because that's your background layer. If I click like the not be able to see button, you can see that it is transparent. So don't draw on your default background color layer. You try to draw on the second layer that it starts off with. So now that you have this, you're probably like, well, how do I like make an animation out of it? So what you're gonna do is just pick a color. That's a very small brush. There we go. So like you draw something on the first page, and you're like, well, how do I do the next page? So when you click on it, you're like, but it doesn't change. What you're going to want to do is click Create New Frame. You're gonna right click the little squares at the bottom and just click New Frame a few times, and then you're gonna have a bunch of frames. So you can draw something, and then you'll have the next page and be able to draw something else. So right now we don't have onion skins turned on. This is why onion skins are important. You can turn onion skins on in multiple ways. Up by your layers is this little light bulb button. That'll turn them on. And then down by your play button, there'll be this little onion. That doesn't do what I wanted. That actually doesn't turn them on, just click the light bulb. There's also a light bulb down on your timeline that'll add onion skins. So right now it's this pale red color, and if you go back to the first one, it'll be the actual red color I chose. It's this pale color because that's what I have set for the previous frame's color for my onion skins. So it'll just be this color because this was the frame before the other one that I made. And then if you go back to the original frame, you'll see the frame after this one as green, because that's what I have for my next frame's color. You can go up here and edit the like opacity of your onion skins. So since I have the frame after that as like kind of opaque, I can make it like super duper defined, and I can also make it like super duper pale. I like it as like kind of a medium. To change your frame rate, you're gonna go into a little frame rate box and then type in whatever you want. I know that a lot of I know some like college classes use 10. I'd personally like using 12 because that's just what the software I used to use would always use. So 12 is a pretty good frame rate, and it's a multiple of 24, which is another common frame rate. I wouldn't start off using 24 because it's very fast. It depends on the type of animation you want to do though. You can make it slower just to do something really simple and cute, or if you want to make like a smoother animation, I would do more frame rates. The frame rate is basically how many frames per second there are, and that means that if I have it set as 12, 12 pictures will be 1 second, which sounds awful, but like if you're like, man, I have to draw 12 pictures just to be a second. Yeah, but it won't seem like that when you actually draw it out. So another thing with Krita is that if you don't have a new blank frame after your last frame, say I remove it and then I also remove these, it'll appear as a blank, like, okay, if you press play, it'll appear as if like just this frame was the last thing there. So if I click play, it stops on there. And then if I have a new frame, it'll play that and then go blank because it'll repeat the last frame that it sees. You can edit your start and stop times. So if I have it at 12, then that'll show me just up to the amount that I want it to have. I'm gonna try to make a pretty simple animation out of this, just to show you guys like what you can do in Krita. I already have it pre-prepared, the time lapse, so I'm just gonna insert that here.
about you all the
Once you have your little cat animation, doesn't have to be a cat, what you're gonna want to do is, well, depending on what you want to do, you can use Krita to draw your little, like, final base or whatever. I'm using a very garbage brush, but, you can make a new layer over here, and, just finish up your thing and then add another one and color it just how you would a normal picture. And you'd basically go through the same process as you did for drawing out all the bases, except you could just do what you do in normal drawing. What I like to do is, so when you render your animation, it'll render it as a bunch of images. It'll save them to wherever you save it to. So if I click export, and I I go in here and I save it as a, that's not it. I have to click, okay, so if you go to, since this is an animation, you're going to want to go to File, Render Animation. I'm not going to render it, I'm just going to save it as an image sequence. So I want them to all save as PNGs because PNGs keep opacity usually. I'm going to have it, I keep my things for the first frame and the last frame. So I'm gonna change the base name, so I'm gonna name it like cat. It starts with 0. So I'm gonna make sure that it saves to this file, so that all the images go in there, because it's going to save as a series of however many frames you have into that file. So I'm gonna save it, and then you don't have to do this. This is just what I do. I'm gonna open up Psy. Once you have Psy open, I'm gonna go to File, Open. I'm gonna go to whatever I put this into, and so once you get into your thing, you're gonna have all these images of your animation. These are each frame, and so what I do is I just open them, and then I make a new layer, I make this lower opacity, and then this just because I like how Psy draws better than Krita, and so I'll just draw my final base, or not base, I'll draw my final like copy onto it, just because I think Krita makes, or Psy makes a better product, but it's just personal preference really. Always make sure you draw on the right layer. I don't know, you don't have to do this, I'm not gonna go through all this right now, but yeah. So if you wanna just keep your little base, what you wanna do is okay, so to render your animations in Krita, you're gonna go to File, Render, and you're gonna basically do the same thing that you just did, except it might save more images. I'm not really sure how to get around that yet, but you're gonna make sure Render is turned on. And what you need to have is FFmpeg, which is, it just helps translate files into different things. If you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to render your image, and you're going to probably have to use like something like the Fire Alpaca Doga, which is a site that takes a series of images and makes them into a GIF. You can click this little button that makes it so that it deletes the sequence after rendering, which means you won't have all of those pictures like you would if you just rendered it normally. What you have to do is you have to get FFmpeg by what I did was I just searched how to render animations in Krita, because I didn't know how to do this either. And then on the Krita help thing, it has all this stuff which you can read more into. And it says download FFmpeg, which is important, and so you're going to go to the FFmpeg website. What I did was I originally just downloaded this. It didn't help, so I went back here and I clicked this, the FFmpeg builds, and then I downloaded this one and it helped a bunch. I saved it to okay, so I saved it into my animation folder that I have, and I saved it here. Not here actually. I have like 4 files of it just because it took me a while to understand what I was doing. I just saved the complete file in there, and what you're gonna do is go into bin, and then you're just gonna do ffmpeg.exe. And so once you have the FFmpeg linked to that, you can click render, or you can click OK. Since this is gonna pop up for me just because I already rendered it as like a series of images, so I'm gonna click yes. It's gonna export. It's gonna do all that stuff, and then it should be done. And what I'm gonna do is get out of here. I'm gonna go to desktop, animation. It should open. Maybe. Okay. And then I'm gonna find this little GIF of the waving cat, and I think this is it. Is it an image? Oh, it's a GIF. Okay. So this is the file that came out of it, and it's not playing because Windows Pictures doesn't like to play GIFs, but you can open it with, I don't want to use Internet Explorer, but it'll play the GIF. So like, it'll come up as a GIF, and you can basically use it and send it to people. You can render it as a bunch of different things. You can render it as a, you can render it as a Matryoshka video. I don't know what that does. An OGG video, I don't know what that does either, or an MPEG-4 video. I'm not sure which one is the best for whatever you want to do. I would go with whichever one's not lossy, which a lossy image format means that it will it'll like not compile, but it'll compress when it's saved, so you'll lose some like features, like I guess color, vibrancy, or frames and stuff like that. I haven't experimented with these enough to understand which one's the best. I'd just use a GIF because it's the most familiar. I guess you could look up more for whichever ones are the best. This is kind of just your basics of how to use Krita for an animation. It does a lot of other things because it's just a alternative to Photoshop. A lot of people will probably want to do like music animations, and to add music, Krita didn't used to have this feature. It kind of just added it. But to add music, you're gonna go into this very, very small button below your timeline. It says, or it doesn't say anything, but it's this like very small speaker shape, and you're gonna click it, and then you have these little options. If you click Open Audio, you can import some things. Where am I? Okay. I have a bunch of audio files in my Krita, and you can just pick whichever one you want. I'm just gonna use this. And it'll import. It's loading for me. And then if you press play, it'll play the audio. I don't think it'll play for me because I just don't have it, it's not long enough, but it should play. What Krita likes to do when you're making a new file, or when you're loading up a file, is that it'll be really choppy when you press play. So like it'll look like it's kind of broken, but if you let it play out for a while, it'll fix itself. The same with the audio. So if you initially press play after loading up like a 400 frame music video, it'll just look kind of broken. But if you let it play out in the background while you're doing something else or something, it should load in pretty good. Or something that'll help is if you pick different start and end times. So if you're trying to specifically edit like frames 100 to 250, then set your start time as 100 and your end time as 250, so that your program doesn't have to load in all of those frames and all of that audio at the same time. I think that the ability to be able to edit a video with the audio over it is really helpful with timing and stuff. I really only use Krita because of that feature, because if I didn't need to use that, I would use some other free animation software. But I like Krita for that. But there are other alternatives if you're looking for them. They're really only like a Google search away. Krita is kind of not user-friendly. I had to Google all this stuff myself, and this is just based on like what I know from looking things up and stuff, so it might not be the most accurate information. But this should be able to help you guys like kind of learn how to get around Krita